The first light of dawn slips gently through the cracks of the wooden shutters, casting soft, pale beams across the straw-strewn floor. You awaken slowly, the cool morning air brushing softly against your skin, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke curling upward from a nearby hearth. Outside, the village begins to stir, a quiet symphony of gentle clinks from wooden buckets, murmured greetings, and the distant crow of a rooster. The world feels peaceful in this early hour, yet beneath the calm lies an unspoken tension, like the delicate thread of a spider's web, ready to tremble at the slightest touch. You rise from your modest pallet, feeling the roughness of homespun wool beneath your fingertips as you gather your simple garments. The fabric, coarse against your skin, is a reminder of the life you live, one woven of hard work and careful obedience. Outside your door, the smell of freshly turned soil mingles with the aroma of herbs drying on a wooden rack, their scents heavy with promise and history. You step outside, the cool earth firm beneath your bare feet, and breathe in the morning fully, knowing that every day here is shaped by rules far older and heavier than the sun itself. In this village, every action, every word, is watched and measured by unseen eyes, laws and customs that govern not just the land but the very rhythms of your life. For a woman like you, these rules are especially sharp, cutting close to the bone of daily existence. What you say, where you go, how you behave. Each step carries weight, each choice can bring reward or ruin. You have learned to move carefully, balancing the freedom you hold with the dangers that lurk when boundaries are crossed, even by accident. The village awakens slowly. You hear the low hum of voices mingling with the clatter of tools and the soft thudding of feet on packed earth. Nearby, the blacksmith's hammer rings steady, a rhythm as constant as the rising sun. Children's laughter bubbles briefly before fading into the cautious whispers of adults who carry not only baskets and bundles, but the worries of a world where missteps can be costly. You know, as do they, that the punishments for wrongdoing, especially for women, can be strange and severe, often far beyond what the crime might seem to deserve. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to live without this ever-present gaze, without the fear of judgment hanging like a shadow over every moment. You think of women whispered about behind closed doors, women punished for offenses others might find trivial or even bewildering. What might it feel like to walk through your days with that weight pressing down, your freedom slowly chipped away by laws that seem made to keep you small? The village breathes around you, alive with the ordinary and the extraordinary mingled tightly together. There is comfort here, in the steady work, in the small kindnesses shared between neighbors, in the rhythm of the seasons. But there is also a quiet, constant undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. This is a place where the line between right and wrong is drawn not just in law but in custom and power, where a woman's fate might be decided by a whispered rumor or a misunderstood gesture. Can you feel the morning air, heavy with both hope and unseen fear? What would it be like to live under laws that judge every step you take, where the smallest misstep can lead to harsh punishment? These are the stories that live beneath the surface of this village, stories of women whose lives were shaped by strange crimes and even stranger punishments. If you're ready, I invite you to stay with me as we explore these hidden histories, quiet tales of strength, struggle, and survival from a time not so far removed from our own. Subscribe to journey deeper into these stories, where the voices of forgotten women whisper softly, inviting us to listen with empathy and understanding. The village hums quietly with its usual rhythm, but beneath the everyday chatter lies a world, shaped by rules as old as the stones beneath your feet, rules that sometimes seem strange, even harsh, to eyes that do not know their weight. As a woman here, you quickly learn that the line between right and wrong is not always clear or fair. Many offenses that might seem small or even innocent to an outsider become serious crimes in the eyes of neighbors and law alike. You might hear whispered tales of women accused simply for talking back to a neighbor, their sharp words seen as a threat to the delicate balance of village life. It's said that a single harsh remark could bring not only gossip but punishment, for speech has power, and in this world, women are expected to speak softly, to keep peace rather than stir trouble. You imagine standing in the marketplace, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and wood smoke, watching as a woman is reprimanded, not for stealing or fighting, but for a careless insult, a moment of anger that challenged the social order. Then, there are the potions, herbs and brews concocted quietly in kitchens and gardens, passed from mother to daughter as remedies for aches and pains. But such knowledge, though rooted in care and healing, often invites suspicion. Some call these women witches, their skills feared as much as respected. A tincture meant to soothe might be twisted into a potion of harm, a gesture of healing become an accusation of evil. You think of the woman you once knew, her hands stained with the colors of crushed herbs, eyes wary as she whispered prayers for safety. To be accused of witchcraft is to face more than social rejection. It is to face danger itself. Superstitions thread through village life like a quiet current. To leave a broom across the threshold, to whistle after dark, or to cross paths with a black cat can carry meaning far beyond simple happenstance. Women are often blamed for misfortunes, crops failing, children falling ill, or animals dying, because it is easier to find a scapegoat than to face the harsh realities of life. You recall the whispered fears that ripple through the crowd when the river floods or a barn burns, fingers pointed toward those marked by difference or misfortune. Even misunderstandings become accusations. A woman who wears her hair too loose, or a girl who laughs too loudly, may find herself the subject of hushed disapproval, suspicion trailing behind her like a shadow. These social rules are strict and unforgiving, shaped by expectations of modesty, obedience, and silence. To stray from the path is to risk becoming a cautionary tale whispered in the village square. You imagine walking through the village, hearing these stories unfold in the quiet moments between work and rest, seeing faces tightened with fear or scorn, knowing that many women carry the burden of these accusations with no way to prove their innocence. Their crimes might be invisible to those who do not live their lives, but they are very real and very dangerous. Have you ever been judged for something small or misunderstood? Perhaps a word spoken in haste, a gesture misread, or a choice that didn't fit what others expected? What does justice mean when the rules seem unfair or are made by those who hold power? These questions echo softly through time, inviting us to reflect on how societies choose who to punish and why. If this story stirs something within you, I encourage you to pause and think. How do we measure fairness today? And how might these old rules still echo in the ways we judge each other? Feel free to share your thoughts or reflections. In listening, we honor those whose stories were too often overlooked or dismissed. The moment your voice carries beyond what is allowed, the air around you seems to tighten, as if the very words could break fragile bonds holding the village's order together. In this world, speech is power, but also peril, especially for women whose voices are meant to be gentle, subdued, and compliant. To gossip, to insult, or to speak against the authority, no matter how quietly or in passing, is to risk much more than anger. It is to risk punishment that cuts deeper than flesh. I remember the day I saw a woman brought to the stocks for her words. The morning was chill, the sky a dull gray, and the dampness of the earth beneath our feet seemed to seep into every bone. She stood there, her head bowed, fingers trembling as the wooden frame enclosed her wrists and neck, making her vulnerable to the sharp eyes and cruel laughter of onlookers. Around her, the market buzzed with a nervous energy, the smell of wet hay mixing with the acrid scent of burning torches lit to chase away the morning's mist. Her crime was gossip, they said. She had dared to speak of another woman's husband in a way that challenged his honor, spreading stories that threatened to unravel the delicate social fabric. The punishment was swift and public, meant not only to silence her but to warn others. I watched as villagers passed, some shaking their heads in sympathy, others pointing with fingers like arrows. Children stared with wide eyes, learning early the price of words that stray too far. To be placed in the stocks is to be stripped of your dignity as surely as your freedom. The wood is unforgiving against bare skin, and the chill air gnaws at exposed flesh. Hours stretch endlessly, each moment weighted with humiliation and fear. The laughter and jeers, the spit and stones, these become the soundtrack of your punishment. It is a sentence not just to physical discomfort, but to social death, marking you as a warning and an outcast. But sometimes the punishment is quieter, though no less cruel. Women silenced by law or custom, told to hold their tongues lest they bring ruin upon themselves or their families. The fear of speaking truth becomes a cage, an invisible shackle binding the heart. I have felt it too, the tightening of the throat when words threaten to burst forth but must be swallowed, the ache of wanting to be heard but knowing silence is safer. In some villages, women accused of seditious speech faced even harsher fates. To question authority, to voice dissent, was to invite suspicion of rebellion or witchcraft. Punishments might include fines, public humiliation, or worse, beatings designed to teach silence and submission. The control of women's voices was not merely about order, it was about power, about keeping them small and unseen. Imagine, for a moment, the fear that presses upon you when speaking your truth feels like stepping onto a path lined with thorns. When has silence felt like a cage, its bars built not of iron, but of expectation and threat? The loss of voice is a loss of self, and in this quiet suffering, many women lived hidden lives, their stories muffled beneath the weight of silence. If this resonates with you, I invite you to reflect. What does freedom of expression mean in your life? When have you felt the need to hold back words for fear of consequence? Sharing these moments honors not only your experience but the countless voices that history has muted. As we listen together, we create a space where those silenced can be heard again, where the power of words is reclaimed, gentle but unyielding, like the soft dawn breaking through night's hold. In the quiet corners of our village, nestled between the thatched roofs and winding paths, lived women whose hands knew the language of plants and roots, a language passed down through generations, whispered softly in the hush of evening. These women were healers, midwives, and keepers of ancient knowledge. Their potions and poultices soothed fevers, mended wounds, and eased the pains of childbirth. Yet, in a world shadowed by fear and suspicion, this knowledge could turn against them. I recall the wary glances cast their way, the hushed conversations halting as they approached. Some saw these women as a blessing, a source of comfort when illness struck or despair loomed. Others whispered darker tales, that their remedies were spells, their herbs curses in disguise. To be labeled a witch was to step into a world where fear outweighed reason, where superstition wove a dangerous web. The village law was swift and unforgiving. A woman accused of witchcraft might face anything from a heavy fine to crueler punishments, public humiliation, imprisonment, or worse. Their homes could be searched, their herbs confiscated, their reputation shattered in a moment. Families, once proud, found themselves shunned or burdened by suspicion, as neighbors turned wary eyes away or spoke in cautious tones. Imagine the heavy weight of such accusations, not only the threat to your own life, but the ripple of fear that spreads through those you love. A healer's hands, once gentle and trusted, become the focus of suspicion. The very gifts that sustained life become twisted into signs of danger. You can almost feel the cold fingers of dread creeping through a woman's heart as she wonders if today will be the day her knowledge is seen as a crime. The punishment often aimed not just to harm the accused, but to terrify the community, to reinforce the boundaries between what was acceptable and what was feared. Public trials and punishments served as grim reminders of the price paid for crossing invisible lines drawn by fear. Yet behind every accusation was a story of survival, a woman trying to care, to protect, and to heal in a world quick to judge. What fears shape the stories we tell about those who are different, who hold knowledge others do not understand? How do you think misunderstood knowledge is treated today? These questions ripple through time, reminding us that fear too often distorts truth and justice. If these reflections stir your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts on fear, misunderstanding, and the courage it takes to stand with knowledge that others may fear. Together we listen with open hearts, honoring those whose gifts were met with suspicion, yet whose legacy endures in whispers and wisdom. There was a time when the walls of my home felt less like shelter and more like a cage, tight and unyielding, where every breath carried the weight of expectations I was born to meet. To be a woman in this village was to walk a narrow path, especially within the confines of marriage. Disobedience, or even a moment of stubbornness, was rarely forgiven lightly. To speak out, to question, or to neglect duties was to invite punishment, not only from your husband but from the watchful eyes of the entire community. I remember the sharp sting of a scolding, the trembling hands that dared to resist, only to be met with firm control. Sometimes the punishment was physical, restraint that held you fast, reminding you of your place. Other times it was a fine imposed by the local lord, a costly penalty paid from your family's hard-earned coin. There was the public humiliation, too, being made to stand outside the church doors or the marketplace, bearing the jeers and pitying glances of neighbors who whispered behind their hands. The emotional toll was as heavy as the physical. Each punishment chipped away at the spirit, sowing seeds of shame and fear. I have felt the quiet ache of loneliness when those meant to love you instead enforced silence and submission. The tension between who you are inside and the role demanded of you creates a constant turmoil, a struggle to find even a flicker of peace. Yet within that struggle, a quiet strength grows. It hides beneath bowed heads and softened voices but refuses to be extinguished. There are moments, stolen glances, whispered prayers, the memory of a kindly smile that remind you of your worth beyond the punishment. Sometimes, the very act of standing your ground even briefly becomes a rebellion of the heart. Have you ever faced consequences simply for standing up or being yourself? When the world pushes back, what gives you the strength to keep going? These are questions that echo softly through time, inviting us to reflect on the courage found in the face of control. If you feel moved, I invite you to share your own reflections or moments of resilience. Together, we honor the quiet bravery of those who lived within the tightest bounds yet dared to hope for more. The chill of the courtroom stone seeps into your bones grows as you stand before those who hold the power to decide your fate. The air is thick with the murmurs of townsfolk gathered to witness the trial, their eyes sharp with judgment and curiosity. You feel the weight of their gazes like heavy stones pressing against your chest, each glance a reminder of your precarious place in this world. You stand accused, not of grand theft or violent crime, but of taking what little you need to survive. Petty theft was a crime often linked to the harshness of daily life, especially for women like you whose hands were empty, but whose stomachs ached with hunger. A stolen loaf of bread, a handful of grain, a scrap of cloth, these were acts born not of greed but of desperation. Yet the law did not always show mercy. The punishments were as varied as they were severe, ranging from public humiliation in the stocks to fines that deepened the burden of poverty. Some were even subjected to bizarre penalties designed to shame and deter, like wearing a bell around the neck or forced labor that left bodies bruised and spirits weary. You recall the smell of damp straw and spilled ale mingling with the cold, musty air of the courtroom, the harsh voices of the magistrates echoing off the stone walls, the sound of a wooden gavel striking hard cuts through the silence, each bang a reminder of the stakes. Shame flushes your cheeks as the crowd's whispers rise and fall like a tide, their judgment swift and unforgiving. The social hierarchy is clear. Those with wealth and status are often spared the harshest consequences while the poor bear the full weight of punishment. It is a cruel reflection of a world where survival is a constant struggle, and justice often bends to the needs of the powerful rather than the plight of the vulnerable. Despite the fear, there is a quiet dignity and enduring in standing with a bowed head but unbroken spirit. The women who faced these trials carried the heavy burden of stigma, yet many found ways to survive, to care for their families, and to hope for a day when mercy might soften the law's hard edges. What does justice mean when survival is at stake? When does punishment become cruelty and mercy a rare gift? These questions invite us to reflect on fairness, compassion, and the human stories behind the laws. If this story touches you, I encourage you to share your thoughts on fairness and mercy. How do we balance law and compassion in our own lives? Through these reflections, we honor the resilience of those who lived on the margins, carrying burdens that history often forgets. The morning air is crisp and still as you are led to the village square, the heart of both daily life and public judgment. The cobblestones beneath your feet feel unforgiving, their cold hardness a stark contrast to the warmth you once knew in the quiet corners of your home. Today you will stand before your neighbors, not as a fellow villager, but as the subject of their scrutiny and scorn. The punishment awaiting you is one both physical and deeply humiliating, a sentence meant to strip away not just your freedom, but your dignity. The stocks are a familiar sight, wooden frames designed to hold your wrists and ankles fast, leaving you exposed to the gaze and ridicule of passers-by. The coarse wood presses uncomfortably against your skin, the rough edges biting into flesh, already worn thin by worry and hardship. Hours will stretch before you like an endless desert, each minute marked by the jeers of children and the cold stares of adults. The sun's heat may scorch your back or the biting wind chill your bones, but worse still is the knowledge that your neighbors see you only as a cautionary tale. Whipping was another brutal punishment, its memory etched deeply in the minds of those who survived it. The sharp crack of the lash, the sting of each blow, the way pain numbs the senses until only survival remains. These are horrors not easily forgotten. Yet beyond the physical agony, the social isolation that follows can be just as devastating. A woman punished so publicly often finds herself shunned, her reputation torn as cruelly as her flesh. It is a punishment that reaches far beyond the moment, echoing in whispers and cold shoulders long after the bruises fade. The pillory, too, held its own brand of torment. Locked by the neck and hands, you are left vulnerable, unable to shield yourself from the crowd's contempt. Objects thrown in anger or amusement, rotten food, stones or worse, become weapons against your body and spirit. The sounds of jeers and laughter mix with the sting of humiliation, creating a cacophony that drowns out any hope of mercy. These punishments, strange and severe, served as tools of control, designed not only to discipline, but to remind women of their place in a rigid social order. Yet beneath the cruelty there is a profound story of endurance. To withstand public shaming, physical pain, and social exile requires a quiet, fierce strength, a refusal to be broken even when all seems lost. Have you ever witnessed or endured humiliation? In those moments when dignity feels stripped away, how did you find the strength to hold on to yourself? These questions invite us to reflect on resilience, on the human spirit's ability to survive even the harshest trials. If this story resonates with you, I encourage you to share your reflections or memories. Through sharing, we honor the courage of those who endured, reminding ourselves that even in humiliation, dignity can be reclaimed and strength quietly born. After the punishment is done, when the crowds have dispersed and the day's harsh judgments settle into quiet, another kind of suffering begins, one that leaves no visible marks but weighs heavily on the soul. The bruises and scars from physical punishments fade with time, but the emotional wounds often run deep and stubborn, shaping lives long after the public spectacle has ended. You find yourself standing at the edge of the village's life, once again among familiar faces, yet feeling profoundly alone. The whispers behind closed doors, the averted gazes, the subtle shift in greetings, they speak louder than any sentence ever could. Ostracism is a slow and quiet punishment, carving out spaces where you are no longer welcome. Friends become strangers. Neighbors who once offered smiles now pass by with barely a glance. Within the family, too, strain grows like an invisible rift. The shame of punishment can weigh on loved ones as heavily as on you, leading to misunderstandings and distance. You may hear the quiet reproach in a mother's sigh, the avoidance in a sibling's hurried departure. The shared burden of social disgrace is often borne alone, even within the closest bonds. Loneliness wraps itself around you like a heavy cloak, and you learn to carry it with a fragile grace. It seeps into quiet moments when you sit by the fire, watching the flames flicker, or when the village falls asleep and only your thoughts remain awake. Shame mingles with isolation, a cocktail that dulls the edges of hope and makes the future seem uncertain and bleak. Yet amidst this silence and solitude, there is resilience. It is a quiet, often unnoticed strength, born from the will to endure despite being cast aside. You find small ways to heal, perhaps in the softness of a child's hand, the steady rhythm of daily chores, or the solace of prayer whispered in the stillness. These moments are tiny acts of defiance against the loneliness, threads of connection woven back into a frayed tapestry. Have you ever felt the touch of loneliness in your own life? When isolation weighs heavy, what have you found that helps you heal and reconnect? These gentle questions invite us to pause and reflect on the human need for belonging and understanding. If you feel moved, I invite you to share your thoughts or simply hold them quietly within. In doing so, we honor the silent suffering that too often goes unseen and give voice to the resilience that quietly carries us forward. Together, through empathy and reflection, we remember that no punishment is truly complete without acknowledging the enduring emotional landscape it leaves behind, and that healing, no matter how slow, is always possible. As the day slowly fades into night, the village settles into quiet stillness. The sounds of footsteps grow softer, doors close gently, and the world breathes a sigh of rest. It is in this peaceful hour that I invite you to pause and reflect on the lives we have shared tonight. The women whose stories often hide behind, the strange crimes and harsh punishments we have explored. These were not just tales of wrongdoing, but stories of resilience and humanity. Women who lived within the strict and sometimes bewildering confines of their world, facing judgments that seem harsh and unfair to us now. Yet beneath the weight of punishment, beneath the whispers and the fear, they held on to hope, courage, and a quiet dignity that deserves to be remembered. Imagine the soft rustle of fabric as a woman settles beside the hearth, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows that dance like memories on rough walls. Hear the distant call of an owl outside, the cool night air carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming herbs. These sensory moments remind us that history is not just facts and dates, but lived experience, the texture of daily life, the emotions carried quietly in the heart. We carry their stories forward not to dwell on pain, but to honor their strength and to learn from their struggles. To understand that behind every law and punishment were real people, complex and full of life. Their voices, long silenced or distorted, now whisper to us through time, inviting empathy and respect. As you settle into rest tonight, carry with you the gentle knowledge that these histories matter, that by listening carefully and kindly, we keep alive the memory of those who endured so much with grace. If these stories have touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts or subscribe, so together we may continue this journey, bringing to light the quiet histories that shape who we are. May peace find you as the stars wheel slowly overhead, and may empathy guide our steps as we walk alongside those who came before us. Rest well, knowing you have listened with an open heart. There is a quiet strength that blooms in shadows, a resilience born not from grand gestures, but from the smallest acts of survival. In a world where harsh punishments and strange laws rule your days, you learn quickly that the key to living lies in secret subtlety and wisdom passed down in whispers. It is not easy. Each step is measured, each word weighed. But within these constraints, constraints, you find ways to protect yourself and those you love. You discover that trust must be earned carefully, and help is often hidden in the most unexpected places. A neighbor's nod, a shared basket of food left quietly on a doorstep, a soft word exchanged beneath breath. These small acts become lifelines, threads connecting you to a web of support that sustains you through the hardest times. You learn to listen more than you speak, to observe the rhythms of the village, and to choose your moments with care. In the face of punishment, you find ways to shield your spirit. Sometimes this means wearing silence like armor, hiding your pain behind a calm face so the world cannot see the fear or sorrow within. Other times it means gathering strength in secret through prayer, song, or the comforting presence of a child. You hold on to your dignity in these quiet moments, nurturing hope when the outside world seems determined to strip it away. You also become skilled in reading others, understanding who can be trusted, who watches with suspicion, and when it is safest to speak or to remain still. This practical wisdom, though unspoken, is powerful. It helps you navigate the harsh realities of your life, turning what feels like imprisonment into a series of small freedoms. Have you ever found strength in quiet resilience or small acts of courage? What secret ways helped you survive difficult times? These questions remind us that bravery is not always loud or visible. It often lives in the softest, most private corners of our lives. If this story stirs something within you, I invite you to share your reflections or moments of hidden strength. Together, we honor the resilience that has carried countless women through history's darkest hours, reminding ourselves that even in silence, courage finds a way to live.